Lore Together is proud to be part of the Boss Rush Games network. Feel free to find out more at bossrushgames.com/network. Hi, I'm Safi.
And I'm Mystic.
And this is Lore Together. This is the podcast where a husband and wife team go over all of the characters, storytelling, and world building of video games. Because it's what we like to do together. We lore together.
Yep. And this is episode 51.
Hooray!
Almost 2
years.
2 years.
Almost 2 years. We've got next episode, and then episode 53 is officially.
Yeah. Before we get into the episode, though, we would like to welcome a new patron.
Yay, new patron!
Stojan Jovic joins us.
Hey, Stojan, thanks so much for being part of this show.
And if you would like to join Stojan as well as our other glorious patrons, you can do that over on patreon.com/loretogether. I'm going out of order this time in case you guys didn't notice. You can gain early access to episodes there, as well as access to our mini episodes and Q&As. And if you want to contact us, you can do that on Twitter at loretogether, on Instagram at loretogether, and through email at loretogether@gmail.com. So, episode 51. Do you know what we're doing?
I have absolutely no idea what you're doing, other than the fact that you kept talking to me about how much it was breaking your brain. Gondar knows what we're doing because you put that clue at the end of our last episode, but did not spoil it for me, thankfully. Nobody spoiled it for me. Thanks, guys. Keeping it a surprise.
So the reason this kind of breaks my brain is it's 14 games.
I'm sorry, what?
It's a franchise with 14 games, and it is really hard to nail down one of those games because storyline is important here, but the storyline is not the game.
Right.
And just this first little tidbit might actually give you some information on what we're doing.
Okay. This
game started development, or the first game in the series started development in 1977. For mainframe computers, before finally being published to consumers in 1980. This franchise is older than either of us.
Oh, man. That's old. So it's about 40 years old.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
As I said, 14 games from various developers, very different styles for all those games. The last of them...
Yeah.
And this is going to give away what we're talking about. The last of them being Legends of Zork in 2009.
Oh, my God. You did it. You did the one that you kept threatening to do all this time, didn't you?
Legends of Zork was an online adventure game. It was not well received and not in the same spirit as the classics. One reviewer literally called it a micropayment system with a crude game on top of it.
Yikes.
That was the last Zork game. The series has gone through numerous iterations.
Okay, yes, which you've been threatening to do Zork for quite some time. And
it is a franchise I didn't know was as big as it is.
Uh-huh.
I only thought there was, a couple text-based games, and then there was a resurgence in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And that was, I thought that was it. There's, like I said, 14 games, not just, 6.
Right. It's a very different situation there.
And they introduced what is known throughout the genre at this point now, and I don't know how to pronounce this. I've heard some people pronounce it as Afghan Cap. It's an acronym. It's Ageless, Faceless, Gender Neutral, Culturally Ambiguous Adventure Person.
I kind of like the concept, though.
Right? And today we're not going to be going through any specific thing because it's just too much. There's too much to cover if we cover just one game. So we're going to touch on various different little things. The universe itself, though, is at once a serious fantasy that isn't at all serious with itself.
Interesting. Okay.
It's like if Monty Python or if Douglas Adams wrote a fantasy universe.
Okay. No, I can dig it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's technically, literally, Monty Python's The Holy Grail.
Right.
It's their version of a classic tale.
Though one of the games, Zork Nemesis, which is the second in that 90s trilogy I talked about, is considered a very dark and gruesome departure in tone. I loved it. It was, in fact, my first Zork game.
Okay. And we're a little sick in the head sometimes, you know.
We're talking like the game opens with somebody stabbing themselves.
What? Wait, huh? Why? Why is that how the game opens?
I never beat it, actually, but I do understand when some people say that it's like they came up with a Myst clone first and then put the Zork stuff on it afterwards. It kind of can have that feel to it.
Oh, okay.
It is that drastic a departure. That being said, sometimes when there is humor in the franchise, it is a little cheap and lazy.
Hardy har har kind of puns stuff.
For instance, there is a whole family called the Flatheads. That's not the cheap and lazy part. The cheap and lazy part is the names of the 12 famous children are all just famous human name Flathead. So John D. Flathead, Rockefeller. Babe Flathead, Babe Ruth. Frank Lloyd Flathead.
Oh,
you get the idea.
Yeah, okay.
But sometimes it's also inventive and interesting, and sometimes you could even say it's social commentary. So,
ooh, getting political.
Yeah, I didn't steer into all that because there'd be a lot more.
Yeah.
I didn't steer into that because there'd be a lot more to write and read, and it would get very chunky.
Chunky? Like a really good chili?
And the humor is in the gameplay as well. For instance, in Zork 2, as you are inspecting a bucket, this is still back in text-based.
Which, unfortunately, because I'm a child of memes, I think of, there's been stealing my bucket.
Yeah. We'll touch on buckets later, too, as well. But you can actually say, if you're trying to figure out what to do with it, one of the commands is to kick something. You can say, kick the bucket, and then you die.
Oh, come on. I would be so mad if that happened to me, I'll be honest, because I wouldn't think about it until after they're like, wait, I would basically have to look it up online and be like, why? Why would this? There's got to be a way. It'd be one of those things where I would probably spoil the game for myself to look up why does kicking the bucket kill you? Is there something I need to do? Did I not upgrade something? No, it's just a pun. It's just a thing.
And the other funny thing that I saw, this was in a list of people's recollections of the funniest things they found when they were playing the franchise. And one of the other ones I read was in one of the last entries, Grand Inquisitor. When you cast a spell, a barbershop quartet sings the name of the spell.
Oh, I love that idea. That's amazing.
So
Fireball.
Yeah, but it's more like Throck. It's like Throck. It's stuff. Yeah. So.
Oh my gosh, I gotta find this on YouTube now. I have to know how this sounds.
Yeah, within the universe there is a tome called the Encyclopedia Frobozzica.
And that was
my clue in the last episode, which details everything from the calendar to the history of cities and provinces, major events, and the dynasties of the Underground Empire.
Ooh, there's an Underground Empire?
So Zork
please.
is the development history is kind of weird. Originally it was called Zork, just as kind of like a word that they just used.
Right.
Eventually it was called Dungeon.
Oh.
But then they started getting sued by TSR.
Oh my gosh.
Because TSR does Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
So they went back to Zork. The whole world is the Great Underground Empire.
Oh, okay.
So, despite the fact it's not all underground, we'll get there.
Did it start with mole people?
No.
Oh my god.
The underground comes later, actually.
Wait, but why? Okay.
It's called the Great Underground Empire retroactively.
Okay.
Yeah, it was called, we'll get to where it was called the Kingdom of Quendar, and then it became the Great Underground Empire. It goes through,
phases.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, rather than doing a rundown of each game or even a timeline of the world, I've picked a few things that kind of piqued my interest while browsing through the Encyclopedia Frobozzica, because of course it's a website now.
Of course, it has to be. Let me guess, it's a fandom wiki name.
No, actually, it's not on fandom.
Oh.
Here's the thing that I found really funny about this. The Zork franchise is so old.
Yeah.
You can find websites from the early, 90s still up.
Wow.
That somebody's just paying, or has running from their home server or something, all text-based with info.
Oh my God, what a relic. I wonder if there's any listeners out there who are too young to understand the GeoCities nostalgia.
Literally, some of these places I found, it feels like you're on a GeoCities page.
Oh my gosh. Does anybody remember when they had a GeoCities or a Angel Fire? Remember those?
What were some of the, in the early aughts, you also had all the journal things that came up, like Live
Journal, Crazy Journal. I had a Live Journal and I had a Crazy Journal. I had a couple of Live Journals, actually.
MySpace.
I did not have MySpace. I did not do MySpace because I wasn't as music focused.
I was on it before it was music focused.
Yeah. So let me guess, you were friends with Tom for a bit.
Everybody was friends with Tom.
Oh my gosh. But no, I just Angel Fire and GeoCities. That was such a crazy time where like I thought I got introduced to HTML and I was like, oh, this is boring. Like I just never picked up programming. Nobody told me what programming was. So if somebody had explained to me, you know HTML and you know how like it lets you put in these little stupid GIFs and like you're able to make your thing look pretty. What if instead you used it to essentially power computers to analyze something or build something? Yeah. Then I would have been intrigued. Nobody ever bothered to explain this well enough to me. That's why I'm in real estate instead.
Yeah. So suffice to say, the points I'm going to pick on are things that I just found interesting. We will touch on some history and a little bit of lore.
Yeah.
Obviously. But suffice to say that this is no means an exhaustive list. The History of Zork, compiled by Andrew Harrington in 2011, runs at just under 300 pages.
So that's why we're not doing a whole episode of it. But are there eras where, like, maybe in the future we'll touch upon an era here and an era there?
We can do that in future episodes. But here is the History of Zork.
So he's scrolling through a PDF that is just... It looks like one of the most boring textbooks on history you'd ever seen. There's not a lot of referential, like, pictures or tables or anything. It's just text, 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 text. Because... That's half of Zork. Like, there's nothing for them to put in there. There's no, like, pretty little images.
I know it's been a decade, Andrew. Your book needs an index. Or at least a table of contents. There is a lot of information out there.
The fans are doing good. Are doing this one right, is what I'll say. Right. Like, you and I have complained about how if you go to the wrong wiki...
Right. Well, here's the thing. Looking up this game, I've ended up in the weirdest places. Mm-hmm. Like there is a computer history wiki that talked about the game, but had way more information on the original mainframes that was built for.
Wow. So it was more about kind of like the technological history of Zork.
Right.
Okay.
So
interesting.
And we could go into Infocom, the original developers. We're talking people running at MIT. I think it was MIT.
Of course.
Yeah.
That feels like half of every game that became popular later that was started between like 75 and 81 was somewhat associated with like MIT.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Like they didn't want to do games. This was a side thing that they just ended up doing.
Wow.
They wanted to do like serious business software because they thought that's where the money was. They did one, I think it was a spreadsheet program or something called Cornerstone that bombed. The company folded and then got bought up by Activision in the 80s. So this is like 1980s Activision when they're still fighting Atari and stuff, you know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that was brutal, guys. And poor Atari had to learn the lesson hard of like you can't just let anybody publish a game on your console. You just can't let anything.
Right.
You just can't keep the floodgates open. That's just not. It's only worked for PC gaming because PC gaming is it's meant to be customizable. Anyway, moving on.
These little tidbits we're going to go run the range from the fantastic to the most mundane.
Okay.
So we're going to start off with a very mundane thing, the Blight.
Excuse me, what you call me?
The Blight, Bloit, is the Empire's most common unit for measuring distances, and land is measured in square bloits. That in itself, not that interesting.
Okay, instead of an acre, it's a bloit. Yeah.
Here's the interesting part, and the problem. This will give you kind of a sense of the humor, too. The bloit is defined as the distance the king's favorite pet runs in an hour. Therefore...
Oh, this is bad. This is so bad.
The length of a bloit changes dramatically from ruler to ruler and slightly from day to day, and is therefore entirely useless as a form of measurement for most practical and all historical purposes.
But yet they're still using bloits?
And this is my favorite line from the entry. Rarely was this change more dramatic than in 619. So they always add GUE, like 619 of the Great Underground Empire. We're not going to say that all the time. It's year 619.
Okay.
When Bosbo IV, who adored his windcat, died and was succeeded by Mumbo II, who was equally enamored of his very, very ancient turtle.
Oh. My. Oh. That poor little turtle. Just ruined
I have to run every day.
Yeah. I just have
Only for an hour, though.
I have this image of this old turtle just being like, can't even. I can't. I just want. Can you just give me some lettuce? Like, that's all I want. Quick sidebar. We were watching a friend's tortoise. One time, I was like, I'm just gonna be cruel. And this was very much a vegetarian tortoise.
Yeah.
Herbivore, I should say, not vegetarian. It wasn't a choice. It's kind of just the way it is. So you'd feed him lettuce, like 1 leaf a day. It's all the tortoise needs. So I decided to put one of the lettuce leaves in her view, but it was on top of her shell, and it was peeking over just so slightly, so that she's trying to get to it, but she turned and she wouldn't get it. And I was like, let me see if this is gonna work, and it worked. And it was that poor tortoise would have been turning for hours had I not been kind enough.
So you did it for like a minute, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, I did I don't even know if I got to a minute. I was like, oh, this is funny. I got a video, and now this is just mean. Like, I just can't do this forever. But it just makes me think of this measuring with this poor tortoise. Like, how do you convince it to run? Do you have to put like a little piece of spinach in front of it and be like, come on, buddy, keep moving?
That's why it would change every day. It doesn't have to go far. If it doesn't want to run far that day, the length of the distance changes.
Unlike, is it always in a straight line too?
I don't know.
I mean, that part, it's just completely, I understand what they're trying to poke fun of historically.
Right.
But it's so outrageous. It's beyond any kind of reasonable logic.
So another bit of mundanity I liked. Birthday is a day of the week.
No.
It is the 5th day of the week. The days of the week in order are Sand Day. Keep in mind, there are spaces between the name and day for most of them.
Sand
Day, Mud Day, Grues Day.
Grues Day?
Grues. We'll get to Grues. Wand Day, Birthday, one word.
Okay.
Frob Day, and Star Day.
Frob Day and then Star Day.
Yes. Birthday originally had a different name, but Dimwit Flathead.
Why? What? Is this the ruling family?
This is one of them, yeah.
Oh, why did they name the ruling family the Flatheads?
We'll get to that too.
Oh.
Changed it when he took the throne around 770. Any earlier records to the name before birthday were erased.
Wow.
And the Flatheads we'll touch on a little bit later. So this entry that we're going to do next is why I decided to do bits and pieces.
Okay.
396 BE. So this is before the Empire.
Okay. Before we're even underground, apparently.
Before the Empire is even formed. At this point, everything is just city-states and provinces.
Okay.
The Mashed Potato War.
Mashed Potato War.
Yep. And this isn't like the War of the Roses, which is an English civil war.
Right.
The name refers to the heraldic badges of the opposing sides.
Yes. Which there was somebody trying to say that Game of Thrones was inspired by that. And I'm like, it's its own thing. Don't even try to relate it to that.
Nor is this like the War of the Bucket. Have you heard of that one?
No. Excuse me. Do you mean bouquet or bucket?
Bucket.
You're talking about English references
This
here.
is not English. This is Italian.
Oh.
So a lot of people think the War of the Bucket is that I can't remember the cities that were involved. This is like pre-United Italy city-states.
Oh, so this is kind of just typical, like, even before Rome?
I think this is after Rome, before before they were reunified.
Okay.
But the War of the Bucket, a lot of people think is this one city stole a well bucket from another city. It's not what it is. That's a myth.
Okay.
It's a good story.
It's like the cow that started the Chicago fire.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a bucket they stole, but it was a symbolic trophy after the battle.
Oh, interesting.
In fact, you can still find it in the city hall in that city.
Oh my gosh.
Or at least a replica of it or something.
Well, now I know where I have to visit when I go to Italy.
And the war itself was, in fact, a centuries-long power struggle over trade and all this other stuff. So that's kind of...
Yeah, that's a constant thing that's happening around that area of the world.
So before the founding of the Great Underground Empire, in a city called Borphee, Borphee...
Why these names?
Sent out various expeditions after some conquesting they had done. One of them, headed by Sir Thaddeus Galepath. That's not a bad name.
That's a D&D name I would have used in high school.
Right.
I'll give you that.
Again, MIT grads.
That was probably somebody's D&D character, actually.
Ran across something in the Northlands. Sir Galepath, quote, wrote in his journal, quote, "Neither I nor any of the men we had believed a word of the scouts' barely coherent mutterings. But his dumbfounded elation was the field of mushy white substance. In blatant but understandable disregard for my orders, the men dropped their belongings and charged down the hill. I quickly gathered my senses and followed behind them. After testing the consistency of the substance with our hands, we threw caution to the wind and dove headlong into what we soon discovered to be the most delicious mashed potatoes that any of us had ever tasted."
It's no longer delicious if you put a person in it. Can I just say that? Like, you can't have person-seasoned mashed potatoes be the most delicious. This is so gross. This is so gross.
The ruler of Borfi wanted to set up a village in his name to harvest these fields of mashed potato.
Oh my gosh, this is what? Where did it come from? Why is it there?
Wait until later.
Does it just rain mashed potatoes?
No, it did.
Was there a hurricane of potatoes that mixed up with some cream? And then it was a really hot summer and suddenly you got these mashed potatoes? I don't know.
So the problem is he wants to set up this village to harvest these mashed potatoes, but Galepath's men had already basically created an encampment and even named it after Galepath. So this led to this conflict and this everlasting strife between these two and the towns and cities that they each controlled just to harvest these mashed potatoes.
But you don't understand, Mystic.
To the point that
they were so delicious that they had to dive in head first and ruin any flavor it had.
To the point that people in one town would go and steal from the other town's fields because that was how spiteful they were over these mashed potatoes. This whole thing keeps going. This whole strife and back and forth keeps going until the year 0, when the kingdom of Quendor is founded, which kind of unites everything.
Okay. So now they can be united under a banner
of mashed potatoes.
Since there's still a mashed potato field throughout the history, why is there a mashed potato? Just the image now, there's like a warrior who's like, I've been on all the battlefields merely so that I can look forward to the day that I return back to the gravy-encrusted lands of my childhood, where the butter seeds.
Gonda, I hope you like this episode, because this is hard to read.
This is so bad. Like, this is just...
It's like bad in that good way, though.
Yeah.
It's like the absurdity actually is that just right amount of absurd to be like, this is so dumb, but I kind of love it.
It's essentially, it's kind of like the same philosophy of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to keep the baseline story. The story is solid. We're just going to put something really random and unnecessary in the midst of it.
You can totally understand a ruler being like, name the town after me. Well, they already have a town there doing stuff. I don't like that. We're going to fight them.
Yeah.
And then you just toss in mashed potatoes. Like,
yes.
It could be any other resource. Wood, iron, gold, whatever. All makes sense.
Stop mentioning Settlers of Catan on this right now.
Brick.
Do you have wood for sheep?
I hate Settlers of Catan. I've never even I've always been last place every time I've played it. I just don't understand the full rules.
The first time I ever played Settlers of Catan Star Trek Edition, I won right away. So
the next entry, Flood Control Dam number 3.
It sounds very technological.
The underground Flood Control Dam number 3 is a staggering engineering feat that must be seen to be believed. It was constructed in the year 783 of the Great Underground Empire under the reign of Dimwit Flathead to harness the power of the Frigid River. Little note here, the Frigid River source is meltwater from a glacier, so this is not exactly a roaring torrent of water.
Oh, so this is kind of like the trickle of waterfalls we see when we visit. So if any of you have been in Illinois, Starved Rock State Park is the state park that nobody knew about until about 10 years ago, and now it's got way too many visitors. And I'm sure it's just gotten worse during the pandemic. But they talked about, we have these waterfalls, and sometimes you go there at the wrong time of the year, and the waterfalls is like literally just like about
somebody turned on a tap on low.
Yeah, an inch or a couple centimeters, depending on where you are, thick. And it's just like running, and it's just enough sound for you to want to pee, but you're like an hour away from where you can.
But if you do see a nice water, if the waterfalls are good, it's cool.
No, when the waterfalls are good, it's cute, cool. But if you go the wrong point in the fall,
too little rain recently or anything like that.
Yeah, it's the leaves clogging up the canyon,
right?
And it's just you're just like this is the tiniest little waterfall, man.
The construction of flood control dam number 3 took
a century,
112 days. From groundbreaking to the dedication. It required the work of 384 slaves, 34 slave drivers, 12 engineers, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Shut up. This was not supposed to be Christmas themed. What are you doing?
Here's the better part. The work was managed by a command team composed of 2,345 bureaucrats, 2,347 secretaries, at least 2 of which can write.
What is with British humor always having to make fun of bureaucracy? There's a national trauma there. I need to get to the center.
I'm not even through this yet. 12,256 paper shufflers.
No.
52,469 rubber stampers. 245,100.
Why are we still reading?
245,193 red tape processors and nearly 1 million dead trees.
Only 1 million dead trees? Now that's the part that I don't believe, for real. After all of that bureaucracy, you only killed 1 million dead trees? Just 1 million trees? Okay.
This mammoth edifice was hotly criticized by many since its founding as having virtually no useful purpose since it never rains underground. Neither this concern nor its extravagant cost would diminish its magnificence, although the economy of the great underground empire suffered as a result.
Oh,
I think
that just sounds like the biggest act of nepotism.
No, we're not even there yet.
Oh.
While there was never a flood control dam 1 or 2, literally he wants to call it number 2 and then he goes, wait, no, 3.
Oh my God.
Others would follow, including number 7 and number 678.
But they're not in sequential order. This is like it's chaos down here.
Yes.
Jeez.
Walking castles. I thought this was actually kind of cool. So, walking castles start out small at birth and make good household pets when domesticated. But tremendous growth spurts will make their owners quickly start keeping them outside. These creatures consist of a trunk, which is the castle portion, set upon 2 legs. The innards, which are completely enterable, are complete with a beating heart and ventricles.
Wait, so you can live inside the body of this living castle?
Tips for observing walking castles in the wild has been compiled into Castle Watching, a field guide.
You know, that's not the craziest thing I've heard.
No, but I kind of like the idea.
Yeah, it's kind of like Farscape. The ship's living, and you have to have the pilot has to bond to it. Yeah, I kind of like that. Okay.
Flatheads. We've mentioned flathead a couple times. Let's talk about flatheads. The flathead is similar to the normal man, but the top of the head is planar, resulting in little adequate space for a brain. Also, interestingly, they can't swim. They drop like rocks in the water. They were also one of the ruling dynasties.
So how did that happen?
All right, let's cover some history. And this segment's going to be a little bit more like my usual episode.
Okay.
So the dynasty that established the Kingdom of Quendor was the Antharian dynasty in the year 0.
Okay.
And lasted through 13 more rulers after Antharian before the fall of that dynasty.
That's pretty long, actually. That's pretty substantial.
Yeah. In 659, Duncanthrax.
What?
Duncanthrax.
Duncanthrax.
Yeah.
Is that the new Skrillex song that just dropped? Like, what is this?
Yo, you're going to love this next name. In 659, Duncanthrax deposed Zilbo Throckrod III.
I'm sorry. What did you call me? What did you say?
Throckrod.
That is not a name that is to be said in polite company. What are you talking about?
It's just funny that it's Zilbo Throckrod III.
The third! There's 2 more before this guy, and they were like, you know what? This name's a solid name. I want to continue on this name as my legacy. That's just bonkers.
With Zilbo Throckrod III being deposed, that ended the Antharian dynasty. We have no reliable early history for Duncanthrax. There's like 5 different origins. He could be a video game at this point.
Yeah.
He goes from a demon in human form to a general to a former rope salesman. So nobody has any idea.
Well, so that's some poorly kept history right there.
I think it's intentional.
I can only hope so.
In his coronation speech, he declared, I, King Duncanthrax, vow that I'll stop at nothing to fulfill my every whim. Every petty longing, every outrageous desire will be tasked upon my loving kingdom to fulfill. I also vow that my children and my children's children will be raised with the same values. The people ended up loving this, as the life would be less mundane under Duncanthrax.
Wow. Jeez.
Duncanthrax, though, would not be ruler for long. A magician named Drespo Molemacher used magic and impersonated the king, and had the real king imprisoned.
Oh. Well, that works out.
Though Duncanthrax was known as a savage ruler, known for his cruelty, and therefore was named the Bellicose King, it is under this fake king that much of that savagery happened, though historians argue that the real Duncanthrax was only slightly less bellicose.
Yeah. I mean, also, isn't it convenient he has a scapegoat? But that's just me being cynical.
When Drespo is finally exposed in 668, he just disappears from history.
Oh my gosh.
I think he fled. I don't think he was taken out. I think he fled and just completely vanished.
Oh, the jig's up, and basically ran away.
As a side note, it is during the reign of pseudo Duncanthrax, as they call him, that the great caverns under much of the ground were discovered. And eventually, after the Empire moved in and started literally digging out more caverns, the real Duncanthrax ruled the world, and that was said to be all that was above and below the ground. Hence, it will eventually be called the Great Underground Empire.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's a little bit like Hollow Earth type stuff.
Interesting.
Around 600, here's where I get to why they're called the Flathead Dynasty. Around 670, Duncanthrax announced to his kingdom that he was to be the first king of the Flathead Dynasty.
Okay.
This took the people by surprise, as it was not known to be part of his title, nor was it all indicative of his clearly non-flat shape of head.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very short person, though. I think he was like 4 feet, they say.
Interesting.
With like really bright red hair.
Oh
anyway,
my gosh.
He declared from then on the flatness of one's head was to be directly correlated with their royal stature, and that he sought the most flat-headed woman in the land to become his new queen, technically. We have no idea what happened to the first queen he had, Esmeralda.
Okay.
She just kind of also disappears from history.
Maybe she ran away with the magician. It's like, actually, you're a better husband. Bye.
So the call went out across the Westlands, and in a very short time, Duncanthrax had found and married a particularly flat-headed and very stunned young lady, Celestra. They were married immediately, and within a year had a son, Belwit the Flat.
Interesting.
After him followed 10 more flatheads, of which we'll talk about one now. Lord Dimwit Flathead.
Interesting.
Likes to go by Lord Dimwit. Safi's rolling her eyes. I do not blame her.
I can't. I must be odd because I can't even right now.
Seen by many as the worst ruler the Empire has ever had, he was excessive as heck.
Oh, really?
For example, his coronation took 13 years to plan.
I'm sorry?
And therefore took place 2/3 of the way through his reign, lasted an additional year and a half, and cost 12 times the Empire's GNP.
Wouldn't you be bored, like, after a week or so of celebration? I just couldn't. I couldn't even deal.
He raised the tax rate to 98%.
Of course he did.
And also decreed the defoliation of 400,000 acres of lush forest.
Oh, wow.
To erect a 9-bloit-high statue of himself in the Fublio Valley.
What was his pet?
A 3-eyed cat.
Okay. 9 bloits, probably decent. It's probably a decent size.
Also, he put in the production of enormous granola smelters.
Granola smelters? They have fields of mashed potatoes and smelters of granola. Okay.
Granola! I knew you were going to ask that, so I had an entry for it.
Oh, no. Why do you know me so well?
Granola is hard, dry foodstuff harvested from the granola mines of Antharia.
The granola mines?
Healthy, all-natural, completely unprocessed, and free of additives. While no one in Quendor likes granola, the gnomes, trolls, and other magical races of the Eastlands loved it. Thus, when Pseudo-Duncanthrax conquered Antharia in 665, he had a market for all the useless granola that he'd accumulated.
I feel like this is a dig at a certain group of people, and I just don't know if I need to be offended or not. Like,
don't know either.
This feels wrong. It's funny, but it also feels very wrong.
A favorite of these natives was a tall, frosty granola float. As early as the 700s...
You mean a parfait? I'm sorry. Do you mean a granola float? That sounds like either a sundae or parfait. That's what you mean.
Right,
like,
yeah. As early as the 700s and 800s, it was discovered that granola could be smoked and instantly became a major addictive.
No. No. This is just...
We're almost done.
The idea that we're rolling granola doobies is just... I'm so bothered by this. I'm so bothered by this. I can't deal.
Although Dimwit was certainly the most flagrantly indulgent ruler in the history of the Great Underground Empire, most of the Flathoods who follow him did their best to uphold the traditions of excessiveness. The high-level taxation continued, although the money was increasingly spent not on massive construction projects, but on extravagant parties and long vacation trips for members of the royal family.
Of course. Classic.
Yeah. In 883, after countless years of decadence and overtaxation, the Great Underground Empire collapsed.
Of course it did.
The royal treasury was sacked, and everyone moved somewhere else. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Gru.
Okay, yes, because there's a whole day that's named after them.
The Gru was kind of a meme before what we call memes today were a thing. You can find shirts, even from back in the day, with the saying, "You were eaten by a Gru" on them.
Oh, yeah, I've seen this before. I've heard this reference before. Since high school, even, I've heard this.
Zork will take any chance to kill you.
Oh, wow.
As will many early adventure games.
Okay.
The Gru is the most fearsome creature known to adventurers.
Okay.
The vicious carnivorous beasts are always lurking in the dark places of the earth, including nearly every subterranean passage where they are rarely disturbed. In the Great Underground Empire, a Gru is as common as a sinus infection, occupying every dark corner, although a Gru tends to inflict more grievous and less localized harm.
I don't know. I've had some pretty gnarly sinus infections. I don't know.
That's why I kind of liken their sense of humor to Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
Grus are always hungry. Their favorite diet is adventurers or enchanters.
Is there a spice related to that? Is there some sort of flavoring going on?
Its insatiable appetite is tempered by its horrible fear of light, which is its only fear. Mm-hmm. Dwelling exclusively in the darkest of darkness, it was once rumored that no Grus had ever been seen by the light of day, and only a few had been observed in their underground layers. However, specific instances of magical influence over the course of history have caused them to overcome this fear, which tells me someone used Grus as an attack or something.
Yeah, or they started basically domesticating Grus.
Right. Apart from these sparse exceptions, Gru shelter themselves from all light, waiting to feast on adventurers who venture into the dark terror without a light source. Basically, always have a light with you.
Always carry a torch. Okay. All right.
And that's where we're going to leave this episode, because already I think I've lost a few brain cells.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that there's nothing here to actually like. Clearly, there is serious story with a veneer of the absurd.
No, I do. I think there's something dripping down to my neck right now. Oh, yes. It's any semblance of intelligence I had before this episode. Great. Well,
people are going to be yelling at us that we're
not. I have to call in sick to work tomorrow because of this.
People are going to be yelling at us that we weren't nice to Zork.
No, I'm not trying to insult Zork. This is kind of funny, but it's all.
It's
not the kind of funny that's gonna make me guffaw or laugh.
Right.
It's, as I said, it's not my kind of humor.
Dimwit, like when you have characters named Dimwit Flathead, you're gonna lose a couple brain cells trying to read it for a lore podcast. This'll be interesting to play and everything. That being said, I don't know what we're gonna play. I know Gondar had a suggestion. Gondar is one of our patrons, if you guys didn't know this. I know Gondar had a suggestion on how we could do a stream of it.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how that would work. I don't know which one he was thinking of, because let's be honest, you typing go west, go east is not going to work.
No, it's not fun for anybody.
I do have Zork Nemesis.
Okay.
But the odd one out.
Right.
Probably not that one. We could get the other ones pretty easily. They're all on GOG.
Okay.
And partly, I may have done a little bit of a disservice to the franchise by not doing story instead of picking what I thought were the zany things, because there is some aspects to this that are actually kind of interesting. Like we're only covered basically up to the fall of the Empire, but that's only half of the timeline.
Right, exactly.
And after you get the fall of the Empire, you start getting away from the magic focus, and magic starts to become less of a thing, and you start getting more into the science of the world is the focus.
Oh, interesting.
In fact, magic was becoming such a big problem over the course of all this that Duncan Thrax actually put through what was called it was the something acts, the Dark Act or something, basically banning anyone who wasn't fully trained from using magic, because people were just using magic for everything.
Oh, wow.
Potions and powders and everything, and not knowing what they were doing, and it was causing real problems.
It's kind of like practicing medicine without a license, you know?
Yeah. So there is definitely allegory and social commentary with this veneer of zany craziness on top of it.
Right.
So I may have done a little disservice to this. I do want to come back to the Zork franchise eventually.
Yeah.
And maybe take a more serious look. This was also the end of the year. It's the holidays. I figured let's do something kind of silly. Because we usually do, this will be a fun thing. Oh, look how much political and horrible stuff is happening in this game.
Political. Yeah. Getting political.
Like, I forget what the last one we did that we thought was like, this will be fun. Oh, it's not.
Oh my gosh. It feels like half the episodes. Like
Just Cause. This will be fun. Oh.
Yeah. That was, yeah.
Unreal. Like, we're going to go and shoot stuff. Like, that'll be fun. Oh, it's all about, like, prisons and slavery.
Yeah. Ooh. Didn't see that coming. Yeah, who knew that some of the most horrible things that have happened in human history would inspire storytelling in video games? Oh my gosh. Well, I think the one advantage of you doing it like this, Mystic, is not only did people get some zany cool facts, and like now if you go to a convention and you say you were eaten by a grue, you now know what that's referencing, because there's people like me who didn't know till today. But I would also say it means we can play whichever one of the games that fits best with our streaming needs.
Yeah.
Which will be it'll be the day before Christmas Eve. If you want to watch us.
Oh, I just realized we're going to have the next episode is going to be released on New Year's Day.
Oh, nice. That's really cool.
And as for what it will be, I don't want to start the new year on a downer. I have to think about that. I have to look into a game that's going to be.
Let's give 2022 a better chance we gave 2021, and that's saying something. So.
Yeah, if anyone has any recommendations for a good lore-heavy, fun thing.
There's plenty of happy video games out there. We just, for some reason, got inspired to do things like Just Cause and Dishonored, and.
Partially, that's because when we covered Paper Mario.
Yes.
Which still has dark stories in it.
Yes.
So I think the problem is that when you start writing lore, no matter how truthful you want it to be, to make lore that people actually want to learn for the most part, there has to be drama in it too.
There has to be a
which
conflict.
Requires some sort of darkness somewhere.
Yeah, there has to be a conflict. And I think that's what it is. And it's especially since a lot of these games are action games, which insinuate that the solution is violence.
Right.
So this means this is going to be the last episode of 2021.
Yep.
We want to thank you for joining us this year.
Yes, thank you very much.
It's been a crazy year, and we hope that we've made it a little brighter, a little nicer. I personally like 2021 over 2020. I know that hasn't been true for everybody, but
it has not been true for everybody. But
we're hoping that at least we were a bright spot amidst everything. Even if you had enough bright spots, happy to be an extra one.
Yep. So thank you for listening.
Yeah. Well, if you don't come to the live streams, we'll
catch you in 2022.
Yeah, we'll catch you then.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.